1979, Governor Robert D. Ray's Global Moral Leadership and the most significant year in Iowa's humanitarian heritage. Few housekeeping items. I'll ask that you all turn off your cell phones. Bathrooms are in the main hallway here, and don't forget, after the talk, everyone's welcome to join out in the foyer for a reception and more chatting with Ambassador Quinn. We're in for a real treat here. And now I am going to introduce Dr. Judy Conlin, who was one of our Ray Society 101 founding members.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you. It was 20 years ago, a group of us came together to study how Drake University might provide a lifelong learning program for people whose curiosity and zest for learning never stops, just like all of you here in the room and anyone on Zoom. We founded such a program. Among the earliest decisions was when to name it. That decision was easy. With the permission of Governor Robert and Billie Ray, people who valued education, who promoted cultural awareness and understanding, it was named the Ray Society in their honor. It was Governor Ray who revamped and expanded funding for K-12 public education in Iowa, among so many other achievements. It was Billie Ray who taught in our public schools. It was both of these wonderful people who never stopped learning and never stopped offering opportunities for others to learn. The Ray Society began offering classes in the spring of 2004. 2 classes were offered, one on the history of music and one on the Middle East. Today, there are over 100 classes offered every semester, and over 1,000 members participating. Quite a jump. When the opportunity presented itself in 2021 for Drake University to receive a $1 million endowment from the Bernard Osher Foundation in order to strengthen and expand its programming, the opportunity was enthusiastically supported by Mrs. Billie Ray, along with the family, many of whom are here, and along with the name change to the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, OLLI, at Drake University. When deciding how best to honor the Rays for their dedication to lifelong learning, we decided to create a living legacy, one that would speak to their love of knowledge and to their history of opening Iowa as a welcoming place in which to live, learn, work, and raise a family. The first person we thought of to provide the inaugural lecture in honor of the Rays was Ambassador Kenneth Quinn. Ambassador Quinn was also one of the first people that Governor Ray turned to for help in building the humanitarian structure in Iowa that provided safety for the Vietnamese boat people, that created Iowa Shares and sent food and medicine to starving Cambodians, that kept the Thai Dam people of Laos together as a culture, and that saved thousands and thousands of people from starvation and death. Ambassador Quinn decided that the birthday of Governor Ray today, September 26th, would have been his 97th birthday, would be the appropriate day to begin the inaugural lecture. Please join me in welcoming and thanking Ambassador Quinn.
Thank you, Judy. Such a wonderful introduction. I have those who have been here before won't be surprised. I have a sort of a little radical idea. And I think, you know, Governor Ray is up there watching, you know, is seen as had to be so pleased, see how OLLI has expanded the Ray legacy and built on that. And I wonder, since he's up there watching, could we all maybe sing happy birthday to him? What do you think? Yeah? 1, like Lawrence Welk. 1 and 2 and happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Governor Ray. Happy birthday to you. Wow, thank you. Thanks for humoring me in this. I tell people when I was in 5th grade in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and Catholic school, we used to have to practice singing in Latin to sing at the funeral masses. And we practiced in class, and the nun, I forget her name, would come around listening to everyone, and she'd sort of walk by, and you're sitting at your desk and singing, you know, Dies irae, dies illa. She stopped and stood next to me, you know, and I'm there looking and wondering what, keep moving, sister. And finally, she quietly leaned down and said, Kenneth, you go to the back of the room and sit with Willie Hausler, who was a German immigrant boy who couldn't speak a word of English, and who was given a box of paper and a box of crayons, and there in ignominious shame, a scar, as you can see, I still carry, 70 years later, 60 years later, 70 years later, about my voice. But I sang the Iowa Corn Song with Simon Estes on Iowa Press when I received the Iowa Award on that. So, I was there sort of lip syncing while Simon was singing. Anyway, but thank you. So, it was in last November when Judy contacted me about doing this. And I said, absolutely, doesn't matter what's on, anybody has planned for me. I'm incredible honor, I've got to be here to do that. And I thought of a topic, I probably should have put a question mark at the end, and I'd say, is in fact 1979 the most significant year in Iowa's humanitarian heritage? Because, hey, there's some tough competition in Iowa, you know? 1918, Herbert Hoover takes food from America to Europe at the end of World War I, feeds 600 or 700 million people. Yeah, and I shouldn't have mentioned it, right? I mean, and 1970, Norman Borlaug gets the Nobel Peace Prize for starting the Green Revolution, single greatest period of food production and hunger reduction in human history. But I'm biased, I admit, but I think at the end, when you hear the story and you see Governor Ray and what he did, I'd like to think that most of you will agree with me that 1979 was the most significant year in Iowa's humanitarian heritage, and maybe the most significant year in Iowa's history, and that. And a question in conjunction with that is, so if you're 250 years, America history, looking back, taking stock, so who would we pick? Who's the greatest Iowan ever? So I like to think Governor Ray is in the finalist category. And of all the, I've had amazing career opportunity to meet political leaders and kings and Lay Son, my wife Lay Son. We got to meet Pope Francis, to meet Prince Charles, met really passionate World Food Prize laureates. But if I were asked what individual do I most admire, it's always a little there's Norman Borlaug, I worked with him for a decade. Bob Ray, I worked with him 4 years, and then afterwards, and it's like, which of your kids do you love the most? That. But I want to say, especially the way that Judy, you, the Ray Society, Tracy, Marshall, Lisa, and you're carrying on in that with that spirit, with OLLI and keeping the governor's legacy. Scott Racker, oh my gosh, with character counts, they've impacted over 8 million people, and so keeping the governor with us, his spirit, so incredible. And when I get to the end, I'd like to maybe mention a couple other things we might think about doing to further honor and preserve Governor Ray's legacy. So let me set the scene. Remember the Vietnam War? Probably don't have to with this audience so much, but it ended in 1975, and there were about 130,000 refugees, including my wife's family, who got out of Vietnam, some from Cambodia, some like the Thai Dam from Laos, came to America. Governor Ray, responding to this, a letter from Arthur Critchfield about accepting the Thai Dam to keep their culture intact. The only governor in the country who responds, goes to the White House, asks President Ford, can I have all the Thai Dam? I was working at the National Security Council at that time. I helped make that happen, and they all came here. And about a month ago, I spoke at the 50th reunion celebration, and people driving up in BMWs and a Mercedes, and hey, the Thai Dam have done very well and are an integral part of Iowa and proud Americans, and now third generation who have been here. In 1977, President Carter came, but the America's doors and that of every other country in the world that accepted refugees were closed. Hey, we've done our part, 130,000 people, many of whom would be at risk. We've fulfilled an obligation to those who fought with us, and we stood with us on this. And so I was on the first mission with Leonard Woodcock back to Hanoi, starting to account for our POW MIAs. There are still some things to do, but America's time with and all the political turmoil that came with it was over, and things were settled down. I went to work for back to the State Department from the White House, where I've been in Henry Kissinger's NSC staff, and I'm now working for Richard Holbrooke, political appointee, who later become quite prominent as a significant figure in the Clinton administration, Dayton Accords and Bosnia, and he was, we were leading the effort to try to rebuild some connection to Indochina, trying to get the White House to agree to maybe take some more refugees as people started to escape out of Vietnam, as the totalitarian communist regime really grabbed hold of the country. And of course, as you can imagine, those in the South that had fought against it and who were still trapped there became classified as the worst people in society. Their children had no future. And they began to think, how do we get out of here? How does my family, how do my children have some future? And so people start to try to sneak out of the country. And at first it's slow, but it's more and more as the government clamped down more on people. People would try to sneak out on small boats at night, go out to villages and remote places in the dark at midnight. And we hope no one will notice as you make your way out into rivers and out into the South China Sea. And can we find some place, any place, to land to be where we can begin to be free, begin to have something of a future and that. I also I was involved in an espionage case. We've all been following on TV, indictments being brought in the in Virginia, in Alexandria, by the U.S. Attorney for Northern Virginia. That's where we brought our indictment against people who are carrying out espionage, including a Vietnamese individual and an American diplomat, I'm sorry to say. And I remember going and testifying in court in the Eastern District of Virginia, and that, and convicting the spies who had violated the Espionage Act. And then in 1978, there was I'm sorry, 1976, here in Iowa, Governor Ray and Colleen Shearer wanted to have an event to celebrate the tie down being here 1 year. So I was a little ahead of myself there. In 76, and Governor Ray asks for and invites President Ford to come to the celebration, which is in late November after the election. He's lost, so he's packing, he and Betty are packing out of the White House, and I'm getting ready to leave and move on in their life. But we draft a nice message from the president, and I get authorized to hand carry it back to Iowa and read it at this National Guard armory, where there's 600 or 700 tied down. They've got their native dress and playing music, dancing, and there are a few speakers. I get up, I read the letter from President Ford, and then I add some remarks of my own, and I come back to sit down next to Governor Ray, who I'm meeting for the first time. And he says one sentence to me that changes the course of everything. It's why I'm here today. And he said, you know, boy, we sure could use a guy like you back here in Iowa. I took him to be serious. Maybe he was just being pleasant. And that. But the State Department has such a program called the Pearson Fellows, but you have to be in 10 years. I only had about 7 years, and so I had to wait a couple of years, but where you can be loaned, as it were, to a governor. Okay? So I'm a federal civil servant, no politics, can't have any politics, partisan politics, and that we work for who's ever won the election and in power, and salute smartly and do what they tell us. And hopefully do it well on this. And so after my couple of years working for Richard Holbrook, I put in and I get the Pearson Fellowship. And in September of 1978, we packed our 3-year-old son, Davin, and a couple of his toys into our 1974 yellow Triumph Spitfire. And we drive to Des Moines, and you know, it's sort of you know, like today, not quite as warm, but very pleasant, and Lei Sun's thinking, oh, this is going to be okay. And then when it got to be January, and we were on the 10th day of where temperature didn't get above 0, and I noticed the phone book was open a lot to the D pages, you know, yellow pages, you know, under divorce lawyers. But thank goodness she was pregnant with our second child by then, and so she grit and you know and made it through for 3 more years. So here we are. Show up in Governor Ray's office. I don't quite know what to do with me, but well, you know. And then there's the election. I hadn't even thought about it. I just assumed he was a shoo-in, but you know, he was running for his 5th term, and he gets Jerry Fitzgerald, a pretty good candidate. And thought, what's going to happen if he loses? What are we going to do? And you know, we just bought a house on 56th Street, which we still have there, and but thank goodness, he won the election, and we didn't have to move. And so it's Christmas Day of 1978, and the Vietnamese invade Cambodia and topple the Khmer Rouge Pol Pot government and send them scattering, ending a terrible 4 years of devastation. They took over in 75. Cambodia had a population of 7 million people. About 1.7 million were dead in 4 years. When I was ambassador there, and have this number of employees once, and I said, everybody who was in a Khmer Rouge concentration camp, raise your hand. Every hand went up. I said, everybody who lost an immediate member of your family in that time, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your spouse, your children, raise your hand. Every hand went up. So on that. So these little things I'm telling you here about what had happened will become more relevant as we go on. But January 1st comes. The U.S. establishes diplomatic relations with China to start the year. And then there's an uprising in Iran. And by the 16th of Iran, I think 16th of January, the Shah of Iran will have fled. Some of you remember the last class on Vietnam, and I played music. Remember I played the song, "We Gotta Get Out of This Place." So I thought, I'm going to look up what was the #1 song on January 1st, 1979, and I'll record and I'll pull it out and play it. Well, it turns out it was YMCA. and I still don't do any politics, so I don't have the song to play today. Whether you're happy or disappointed, whatever. But I was surprised to find that as well. So January 16th, the Shah of Iran is fleeing, but the big story that would lead the news was, I'm happy to say here, Drake beats Wichita State in basketball, 114 to 109 over at Vets Auditorium. And of course, #1 Drake fan, Governor Ray was there. And as he was given to do, he'd come back to the office, and he comes back and sticks his head in and said, "Hey, anything for me to do? Or I've sent Billy and the girls home." And I said, "Governor, you need to come in and you have to see this show that we've recorded tonight. It's Ed Bradley on CBS Reports. And it's a documentary type program of video that he shot in December on an island off the coast of Malaysia. And it was reflecting, and the show was about the Vietnamese boat people. All the numbers that were fleeing out of Vietnam had become so large. And people are fleeing on large boats. And so I brought, usually I don't do this, but I brought a few pictures for you to see. And if the slides work, and see, yeah, and I, as usual, have followed up everything, technically. In the State Department, you get to a certain level, they don't allow you to touch any technology. But ambassadors, secretaries, never get it right. So, thank you, Tracy, here. And so these are some of the images that you would see of boats. These are smaller boats. And it's not, what have we done?
I don't know.
I have to.
It's our combo.
Yeah, okay, well, and so these are more, so we have the one there on the left, on the screen, hundreds of people on there. Hardly any room even to move. Women, children, civilians. And the video is shot by Ed Bradley. He's standing on shore. This boat is hundreds of feet out it's been, as all these boats, as what would happen was they'd show up, the local people, they weren't mean or terrible, they'd give them more gas, they'd give them water, maybe even give them some food and that, but then they said, go someplace else. And they push that boat, like the one you see on the left, they push it out, back out. And there, Ed Bradley's standing on the beach with his crew, they're filming, he's describing it, and the boat begins to break up before your eyes. And you see it falling apart, and you see people, like, imagine that boat and all those people starting to fall into the ocean, and the waves are so high. And some lucky few come washing up on the beach. And that center picture is Ed Bradley, who literally drops the mic. And he goes into the water and he picks that woman up and is carrying her out, up onto the beach down there. And Governor Ray, watching this, he was so affected by it. And he could not stay seated. He couldn't stay still. And he got up. And he said, why is this happening? What's happening? And I get up with him. And we're walking around down in what is his lower office now, the Robert Ray conference room, down on the bottom floor of the Capitol. And I'm explaining to him, well, you know, the doors were closed. America stopped taking any more refugees. And these people have no place to go. Australia, France, Canada, New Zealand, wherever. There's no country, including the United States, taking them. The governor comes back down and sits down, and the program continues, and they show video of happy Vietnamese refugees, and by chance, some Thai dam, and that, so we can probably go back to the main screen.
It's not like
That, you know, we practiced this all before, I actually.
Thanks. Oh, it's
Yeah, okay.
there you go.
And we're watching the rest of the program. And so here the scene, planes arriving, you know, Vietnamese, Asian refugees getting off, carrying their bag. And so it's file film. It's tape of refugees arriving in 1975 and 76. And the camera by chance goes down and focuses on one of the baggage tags, and it says Des Moines. And it was like a sign. And these terrible images of human suffering. And the experience of the Thai dam. And that night, Governor Ray, David Oman was there, Susan Mitchke, who was his kind of personal assistant, we called them secretaries those days, you know. But and I we work on this letter, and he writes a letter and signs. So it's now after midnight. It's January 17th, and he signs the letter. He says, I'm going to go home, but tells David Oman, call a press conference first thing in the morning. I'm going to tell the press what I've done. So on January 17th, 1979, the governor of Iowa, Robert D. Ray, becomes the only governing official in the world who has said that he will accept Vietnamese, Indochina refugees. These hundreds of thousands of refugees who are desperately going about being marauded by pirates, robbed, women raped, their boats sometimes overturned in bad weather, dying, desperately seeking someplace. The one person who was governing official who said, I will take them, is Robert Ray. And he says that the next morning. And the Washington Post runs a story in its paper and saying Governor Ray announced he has written to President Carter informing him that the state of Iowa will resettle an additional 1,500 Indo-Chinese refugees in the coming year. The governor said however, he was motivated to take this final action after viewing the highly moving CBS documentary on the boat people by reporter Ed Bradley. And the governor said, the report goes on to say, with so many dying or languishing in camps, the governor believes we Americans have a moral obligation to provide assistance. And it references his having resettled the Thai Dam. And the governor saying, you know, I was not only a state in the heartland, but a state with a heart. Yeah. So, and the governor was so motivated in this, had me draft a letter, which he sent to every other governor in America. And they were going to be meeting in the first week of February in Washington at the winter meeting of the National Governors Association. And one of my assignments was to work on federal issues, so I went with the governor to meetings like that. And he asked, could he especially be allowed to address his fellow governors? And they're all seated around this big rectangular table in the order by which their states were admitted into the Union. And so out of respect for Governor, who had been the chair of the National Governors Association and at one point, and he's given this time, and the governor gets up and he talks about seeing this program, and he talks about what was in his letter. And he said that people are dying, and he makes this incredible, compelling case. And then he said, how many of you can be with me? And the room was completely silent. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've encouraged the governor to do this, and here he's made this appeal, and no one is responding. And so finally, the governor of Michigan, named Bill Milliken, who was a Republican and was really quite friendly, and you'll see him again, my presentation, said, I'll be with you. And then the governor of New Jersey, Brendan Byrne, a Democrat, out of nowhere said, I'll be with you too. And so we form a NGA, National Governors Association, task force on the refugees and to work on this and to begin lobbying and urging the president to reopen America's doors. And we would be doing this on and off, and I knew how to plug in at the State Department, where the feedback was, you know, the political sense is that refugees and taking our jobs, and it's not such a popular issue, and President Carter is going to have re-election coming up, it'll be tough. We're really going to take on an issue like this. So there's a lot of political, aspect to all this. Now, in this period, there are a lot of other things going on of very considerable significance. On March 24th, the governor introduced the new leadership of the National Guard. Some of you, if you're here, may remember Iowa. I was very proud of the National Guard right now. They travel and serve around the world. They're deployed in many difficult, dangerous places. It's an organization of great pride. But in 1978, the Iowa National Guard had the lowest percentage of strength present for duty of any National Guard in America. In last place. It was the political military leadership of it had terrible issues. One adjutant general had been indicted, another had been removed. The governor had to fire one for lying to him. And so we set out, and given my experience with the military in Vietnam, we set out to find a new leadership team, and we introduced Air Force General named Roger Gilbert as the new adjutant general. Very unusual to have a blue suiter, as they were called, take over what was largely the Army Guard, but he was the absolute right choice. And Warren Bud Lawson would be his deputy, and they turned the National Guard around and set it on this course to where it is today. Then in June, we were the host in Cedar Rapids for the National Governors Association White House, actually it was the White House National Governors Association Export Conference. We had 7 governors, 5 members of the cabinet there. This was my first experience of event planning, and the lesson I learned was they could have adopted the Communist Manifesto, and I wouldn't have been bothered. All I cared about was the security, state trooper security were drinking so much coffee, I didn't know I was going to pay for it, and the cocktail shrimp that I was paying big money for were disappearing so fast. And how was I going to cover that and I'd be in, so yeah, I still am to this day plagued by this. But it was incredible success putting it on. Then in June 28th, 47 tornadoes swept across the Midwest all in one night. 2 of them hit in Iowa, 1 in Algona, and that F3, I'm not sure I understand what the difference is. F3 is what, is F2 worse or better, but, but 104 homes destroyed, 349 other homes damaged, 20 businesses destroyed. Somehow only 5 people died in this. And we needed to call the National Guard to service. A lot of stories in the press about calling the National Guard to service these days. I know all the rules and laws because only the governor in our state, only the governor can call the National Guard to state service. And and he was out of the country on a trade mission in Romania. There was still the Iron Curtain then. And the lieutenant governor didn't run with the governor on a ticket, so there wasn't sort of a handoff of, oh, you're in charge now. The governor's in charge, even if he's in Romania. And we have to find Governor Ray in Romania to get him to authorize us telling Roger Gilbert, yes, take the National Guard to Algona and Manson. And so, and the sirens are blaring over Des Moines, over the state capitol. I'm there on my rotary dial phone, because the legislature wouldn't buy touch-tone phones. And you have to dial, how do you call, you get the operator. Now there, operator, I need to call Europe. Oh, I'll connect you to the long-distance operator. All right, long distance. I need to call Europe. I'll connect you to the overseas operator. Overseas operator. And I need to call Romania. I'll connect you to the London interchange operator. So every one of these is somebody's taking a plug, right, and putting it in, and there. I get, hello, this is the London interchange operator. I need to call Romania. So now you get to this Bucharest, the communist society operator, and he wasn't even in Bucharest. They were in some town outside there. So I go with Novatsky or whatever, and so I got the operator there. Now the English is, I need hotel Neopol or whatever, And so it's 2 o'clock in the morning there, the phone rings, and some sort of sleepy person, oh, hello, I said, Governor Robert Ray of Iowa. So the phone's ringing now. And somebody answers it. And a woman answers it. And I've been working for the governor now for, 6 or 7 months. And I've seen Mrs. Ray a number of times. And the one thing I was sure of, that this was not Mrs. Ray's voice. Now, crisis management. What do you do when you have only an instant? And how do you, and so of course if it was in the U.S., wrong number, or just hang up. But we really needed to talk to Governor Ray, so I said, can I please speak to Governor Ray? I don't care who you are. I didn't say that, but I'm thinking, whatever, just let me talk to him. I'll never tell anybody. And then this woman says, oh, you've got the wrong room. 2 in the morning. So what's she going to do? She's going to hang up, right? Please don't hang up. And I said, I'm calling from Governor Ray's office in Des Moines. We have an emergency. And it was Governor Milliken's room, right? The Republican governor of Michigan. Only another governor's spouse would understand how important that was. So wait a minute. She leaves Bill Milliken still sleeping in the bed there, I can imagine. Goes down the hall, bangs on the door, gets Governor Ray up, brings him to her room, sits him down on the bed, I'm imagining, next to the sleeping governor. He says, why don't you, Ken, what is it? I said, Governor, and I'm telling him what's happening. He says, need your authority to call out the National Guard. And so I guess I gave him enough. He said, you got it, thank you, Governor. I hang up, I get Roger Gilbert on, you've got the authorization, the Iowa National Guard's on the road to Manson and Algona. And that alone should make it, the most significant, I'm not sure what year, in 1979. So next morning, I contact Lieutenant Governor Branstad, because he's now to be the face of Iowa in the middle of this incredible disaster. I get a National Guard helicopter like the ones I used to ride around in Vietnam. We pick him up and take him, 32 years old, lieutenant governor, 6 months, his first major crisis, and he does an incredible job. And he still tells people about this story. He had to call the Winnebago County Sheriff or something to find him, and he was out playing softball because they hadn't gotten hit by the tornadoes up there. And that rain next morning picked him up. We went to see the incredible, incredible devastation there. So Governor Ray gets back from Romania, and the Secretary General of the United Nations has called a meeting of the entire UN to meet in Geneva on the issue of the boat people refugees. And now the U.S. is going to send a significant delegation, including Assistant Secretary Holbrooke, for whom I work, led by Walter Mondale, Vice President of the United States. And we're going to Geneva because Geneva is where the UN High Commissioner for Refugees is located. And they're having a conference, and at any conference, the UN, as President Trump was making reference the other day, everybody gets up and talks. And you go up and talk in alphabetical order, and sometimes it's alphabetical order in French, but this was in English. And the U.S. is near the very end, and there's 2 kinds of interventions, as they're called. One from free, non-communist countries, they say, isn't it terrible, these people are suffering, certainly hope somebody does something about it, they deserve to be helped. The communists all get up one after another and say, this is all a trick by the Americans and the capitalists. They want to keep North Vietnam poor. They can't stand that they lost the war. Don't believe any of this. don't go along with this, and these refugees are who shouldn't be accepted, and they should go back and help rebuild their country to socialist dynamism or whatever. And then Walter Mondale gets up, and he talks about the ship St. Louis, that in 1939, filled with Jews from Germany, and is fleeing Europe, fleeing the terrible persecutions there, fleeing what will become the Holocaust, and sail to Cuba where they're turned away. And then the ship St. Louis comes and stops at American ports, desperately seeking, accept us for asylum, and turned away and sent back to Europe to die in the Holocaust or suffer there. And Walter Mondale says, we Americans must never ever have that again. And I'm here to announce that the President of the United States has decided that America will accept 168,000 refugees a year. He is sending the United States Navy to the South China Sea to pick up boats filled with boat people, refugees. And this is a moment where the boat people are now going to be saved. And in one of the most stunning moments ever, all of the countries, except for the communists, give our country a spontaneous standing ovation. And as Walter Mondale walked down and the delegates are standing and applauding our country's humanitarian leadership, and Governor Ray, who was seated in prime spots in the delegation, gets up and walks to him and shakes his hand. And I was sitting there listening here, and he said, "This is one of the proudest moments of my life as an American." What started on that night, January 17th, in the governor's office, have led to this change of American policy. I learned you can shape foreign policy from Iowa sometimes better than in Washington. And to this moment, and there were maybe 100,000 Vietnamese in America in 1975, and today the number is somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million. Because of the moral leadership of the governor of Iowa. It's the only governing official saying, "I'll accept," and writes to the president. And only that moment could have been seen by all Iowans, see what their governor had brought about. As we came back to Iowa after that, we shortly had 1 month later, we find out, oh, the Pope's coming to town. And begin the preparations for the papal visit. And Joe Grubbs on the governor's staff was a minister working on the kind of religious side, papal visit, Catholic diocese. But I was to be the public security, and I knew right what to do. Because I called up Roger Gilbert, can we have Colonel Harold Thompson, who I knew to be the person who will coordinate all of the public security, all the arrangements, other than anything about the religious side. And being up on that hill October 4th with the governor and looking out, 350,000 people, and John Paul II, giving, first had the interfaith prayer service with Bishop Dingman and Rabbi Jay Goldberg and Reverend Fred Strickland, who is the pastor of Corinthian Christian Church. So Protestant, Jewish rabbi, Catholic Bishop Dingman, Catholic bishop, joining with the Holy Father, interfaith prayer service. Then it's time for the Mass. And among the faithful bringing up gifts are Vietnamese refugees in red, bright blue and red ao dai, their traditional native dress. And among them receiving communion was a Hmong from Laos, different tribe than, but a lot of them are in Minnesota. Hmong refugee who was a convert to Christianity and made his first communion, receiving his first communion from the Pope, you know, so not bad. I learned that because the Catholic diocese has supported a small Hmong historic farm outside of town. And it's filled with incredible artifacts and historic pictures and documents of the Hmong who fought as part of the CIA secret army in Laos on our side. It's a project we should talk about and how we can find some support for preserving that, making it part of Governor Ray's legacy of all, because they wouldn't have been here either, except for Governor Ray on this. And so the afterwards, as the Pope had given his blessing to the crowd, it was just a mesmerizing moment. And as we took off in the helicopter, the governor had been employed by the Des Moines Register to take photos. I mean, he got paid, he was commissioned, because he's the only one who could fly. You know, the Secret Service, nobody else can fly over Des Moines, you know, while the Pope's around, so he's taking pictures that appear on the front page of the paper. So the relationship with the Register there. A couple of weeks later, we're on the plane traveling again, part of 7 governors going to China, part of the first group of American governors traveling to China after establishing diplomatic relations. You know, Deng Xiaoping had come and visited the U.S. Actually, I used some of my connections. We were in the running to have him come to Iowa. And I made the pitch. They said, what could he see? And I said, well, we could take him to there's a new shopping mall out in West Des Moines, and to a girls' basketball game. And they loved that. And at the White House, they said, you lost out to Texas because the thought of Deng Xiaoping freezing to death, like your wife was afraid of. Well, they didn't say that, of course, but, you know, it was just too much, you know. So we lost out to Texas, but we're there. We're off to China. We meet Deng Xiaoping. We start the beginning of the U.S. Agricultural trade with China. You know, you see the figures today, 12 billion in soybean sales last year. So far this year, 0, but see what happens. But Governor Ray is one of the forefront of that. I got to meet Deng Xiaoping, got to travel around China, you know, see what it was like. And then while we're there, Governor and I talked about it, and Governor Ray said, what do you think, to the other governors, what do you think? Should we stop in Thailand and visit refugee camps there? And so, you know, Governor Milliken was on this trip, and so, yeah, that sounds great, let's do that. They asked the White House, sure, you know, humanitarian situation, refugees, since we're, you know, we can take all the good bipartisan support we can get, and so we fly from China, and we're there for about 10, 12 days, and we go to Thailand because we're going to go and visit refugee camps, which have been there 3 or 4 years, and people living in thatched huts, but they're safe, and there's some of them are Thai Dam there. And we land, now it's about October 25th, 26th of 1979, and the ambassador comes to meet us, Mort Abramowitz, who I knew from work, and said, we have to change your whole schedule. you have to go to the border tomorrow, there's this new development. So next morning, in a bus, we go out to a place called Sakeo. And now we have to pause for technical, yeah, okay, there, so, and don't go far now.
I'm not.
That's, yeah. And so, you see, there's Governor Ray, Governor Milliken, and Governor Lamb. Richard Lamb is on the left. Governor Milliken, who was sleeping during the phone call, is in the middle. Governor Ray, here's the plane we came in on. And then you'll see there's Governor Milliken with his aide named Jim Jordan. Not that Jim Jordan, just, and we see this camp and with this young man carrying this very sick child. But then I want to show you what else we saw. And okay. And so we're going to change these. So this is 30,000 people. This was the 5th day. Cambodians who have been part of the genocidal victims of the Khmer Rouge Pol Pot genocide. Remember I told you the Vietnamese swept into Cambodia and deposed the Khmer Rouge and drove them from power. These 30,000 people had escaped out of this Khmer Rouge camp, stumbling into Thailand and falling down in the middle of this big, vast, empty rice field that had been harvested. And there, with nothing to sustain them, and incredibly devastated, weak. So you see this woman sitting there by a water tank that had been brought in, and she was coming to get water, and it's too weak, and she couldn't get up anymore. And Governor Ray had his camera out and is taking pictures of all of this. So if we can go to the, and here's this little boy all alone, his life draining out of his body. They're in this kind of makeshift hospital, if you could call it that. And going by one, and while we were there 2 hours, 5 people died. They were dying 50 to 100 a day, and bodies being bulldozed into mass graves. We walked over. So there'd been 5 days, so there were already 250 to 500 bodies in this mass grave. On that, it was the worst human suffering any of us had ever seen. By far, nothing had come close. And these pictures, because they're close-ups, don't give you that sense of just. It's like the whole student body of Iowa State University is put out on some space about as big as Jack Trice football field or a couple of football fields, and they're there in the rain, and the images, the sights were just overwhelming. The young man who you showed you, Jim Jordan, was carrying a suffering child and died in his arms. And it was so incredibly overpowering, and a sense of what to do. What can you do? What can anybody do? And so we were there a couple of hours. We took a couple of hours to drive back to Bangkok, and all people could talk about. The next day we went to the regular refugee camp at Nong Khai, and we're at Thai Dam refugees. They had a sign up with Governor Ray's name on it. Can you imagine? Here, 10,000 miles from Iowa, sign, Governor, welcome Governor and Mrs. Ray. And the refugees beckoned us in, said, we want to show you our symbol of hope. We thought, oh, it must be some carving or some amulet or something, some religious, and they take us over to this little stand with a little thatch cover, you know, like a bulletin board, and they said, there, that's our symbol of hope. And tacked up on the bulletin board is the Iowa Department of Transportation highway map. Yes. Our hope is to go to Iowa. And they had little pins in there about where other tie-down were. And so on the, you know, so we can finish with, you know, and as we flew back, all the governors could talk about. What can we do? What's happened? How overwhelmed they were by what they had seen, what they had experienced. And some of them spoke, and the stories got out in the press. And so when we arrived back in Des Moines on October 29th at night, Layson brought our 3-year-old son out there. I was holding him. And David Yepsen, young political reporter, out there to meet us, and he interviewed me, and I said, just imagine, my son, being in that kind of circumstance, seeing children like that suffering. And then he interviewed Governor Ray. So Governor Ray's here, David Yepsen's here, I'm standing here, and he's having Governor Ray is telling him about this. And remember I told you one sentence sometimes, one can change the course of things. And David Yepsen says, do you have any pictures? And the governor reaches into his bag and he pulls out a handful of yellow cartridges. You all know, right? Or Kodak cartridges. Young people now have to explain what they are when I talk about this. And he's holding them there in his hand as if to say, sorry, I haven't gotten them developed yet. And Yepsen says, can we have them? And the governor pauses for a second. And at a time where relationship between journalists and politicians are not, but reflecting the Governor Ray's attitude and assessment of the Des Moines Register, not necessarily a paper that was so favorable to Republicans, hands him the film. And the next morning, October 30th, on the Des Moines Register, there are stories. In a headline it says, I watched refugees die, Governor Ray says, quote unquote, I watched refugees die. And a story and a picture, one of those photos of that girl sitting there. The scene of that was so, the story next to it said, Cambodians die in the rain, a journalist reporting it. And that story that Governor Ray, pictures, front page story, and many more inside. The Register developed it overnight. And in the morning edition going across the state, the images of the photos Governor Ray took were like an electric current shooting across the state. Now, a couple of days later, Governor Ray had a speaking engagement in St. Louis at the church, his church. Trying to remember the name of it, United Church of Christ Assembly.
Disciples of Christ. Disciples of Christ, right?
Yeah.
University Christian.
I wrote down the name. Anyway, it's like the first Christian church just up here, but part of that. But the National Assembly, about 25,000 people. And they are, because they're in the anti-war movement in America, that belief that the refugee program was meant to harm North Vietnam, harm Vietnam, take its good people away. And the church was getting set to adopt a resolution opposing the American refugee program. And Governor Ray is invited to get up and speak. And he gives the single, in my opinion, the single most powerful, impactful speech of his entire political career in Missouri. Never seen really by Iowans. And he gets up in front of these 25,000 people in Kezar Auditorium or so. And he starts by saying that we're gathered here in the Show Me State in Missouri. And he said, it's the General Assembly of the Christian Church was the name. And he said to them, have you ever stood in a small, muddy spot while 5 people around you died? Well, I did. And he said, Christianity and Christian love know no boundaries. They don't stop at the state line or national boundaries. So you've heard about how bad life in China is. Well, I was just in China, and life there is like a walk in the park compared to what we saw at our last stop in Thailand. And he said, I believe we can never live with a clear conscience if we turn our backs on dying human beings who cry out for a touch of life. He said, there's no way I can describe the misery and human suffering and anguish of these people, God's children. We're not talking about where they're going to live, to address people saying, oh, you're bringing more people here, but whether they're going to live. And then he said, we're here in the Show Me State. Don't tell me about your concern for the poor, the disenfranchised, the underprivileged. Show me. Don't tell me your concerns about the hungry, the thirsty, the homeless. Show me. Don't tell me of your concern for these people when you have a chance to save them. Show me. Don't tell me how Christian you are. Show me. Show me. Show me. And that assembly then votes down that resolution and votes a resolution of support for the refugee program. When we got back in Iowa, in Des Moines, the governor's pictures and other caused so much stir. And the stories are being picked up. Iowa Public Television, Dan Miller, Mary Jane Odell, who was a saint in Iowa Shares, did a program interviewing the governor, Mrs. Ray, and myself, what we saw. Iowans Need to Know program. Michael Gartner got me, said, we were up in the Des Moines Club, and he said, I don't know what you might do, but I'm prepared to put the editorial pages of my papers, the Register and the Tribune, behind anything you want to do to help alleviate this situation. And then those 3 religious leaders, Bishop Dingman, Reverend Strickland, Rabbi Goldberg, come to see Governor Ray. And I remember sitting in the office with the governor, and they're saying, Governor, these pictures, this situation is so terrible. We have to do something. We don't know what to do. You're our governor. Whatever you decide to do, we will be there to support you. And when they left, the governor turned to me and said, well, what should we do? So, I'm playing for time, well, let me think about it. So I go home that night, and it's really true. I wake up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I said, Iowa shares, and I write it down. Iowa sends help to aid refugees and end starvation. I come back, I tell the governor, he likes it. I call Michael Gartner, we're in on this. And so on the day before Thanksgiving, we planned a big press conference. We're going to announce all this. And then two upstart young reporters from the Tribune, Dave Elbert and Tom Witowski, they find out, scoop it, and I called Gardner and said, hey, these guys are going to ruin our press conference and surprise. He said, sorry, I can't do anything about the reporters, only the editorial pages, which is what he should have said, right? What he should have said. And so we launched this campaign. It's going to be from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and we're going to ask people to send in money. We have I get a post office box 1979, Des Moines, and we're going to make the campaign in terms of the cost of a bushel of corn. It's like, what does IRA produce? We can't send them our corn, but we can send them equivalents. So a bushel of corn was $2.20 in those days. And we were appealing to people, and the governor makes the announcement, and the religious leaders are there with him. Michael Gardner's there. Roxanne Conlon and Arthur Davis from the Democratic Party are there. Sheldon Rabinowitz, the Republican Party, and a banker are all there. And we form a 501c3, and we're all excited. And people will be clipping the coupons out of the register, and it'll be appearing in other newspapers. The Jefferson Bee, the weekly, even picked up the story, front page on it. The word is spreading. And Nikki Schisel and I were two people in the governor's office to run this for the most part. I mean, everybody had a hand in it. And on Monday, Nikki goes over with the key, and she comes back from the post office, and she's got about 8 letters. And just like that feeling I had when no governor raised their hand, when Governor Ray made his appeal, crestfallen. People don't care. All this, nobody's responding. Next day, Nikki goes back, pick up what's there, and she calls up and she says, you have to send a truck. And we have to get a larger box because there are so many envelopes. And you cannot believe how many and people responded all over the state. We got one corporate contribution of $25,000, only one. We got endorsements from Hayden Fry and Lou Olson and Donnie Duncan, from every business commodity organization, business association. Churches were having second collections. Fundraising, we had a young man, people saw these ads to clip out. This one you see, Children Die Quietly, it was a group of women around the state, put their own money in. All their names are on there. If only I could have a better image myself. The bad images are all my fault, not OLLI staff on there. Can we move to the next one here? Here's a young man who came in to see the governor, 9 years old, gave the governor his Christmas money, $50, buy food for the Cambodians. A woman sent in her wedding rings with a note, said, I don't have any money, but here, sell my wedding rings. And so we sent the wedding rings back to her. And maybe she was divorced, really didn't want them. We didn't ask, And we got 500, and we eventually, we got up close to $600,000, which in today's money, it's like close to $2 million. But, so it's middle of December, we've got, 150,000 or so, and George Mills was working at Channel 13, says, well, what are you doing with all the money? So I started calling around all who you'd think, Red Cross and other type organizations, and they're all happy to take our money. And I said, but we have only one requirement, every penny we give you has to go to people in Cambodia. Oh, well, we have a lot of programs, and we have overhead expenses, and people would take my call, but nobody was going to divert from there. We need 10, 12%, for administrative costs, until I somehow talked to Monsignor Robert Call Me Bob Charlebois at Catholic Relief. And I don't know, maybe it was, the going to Catholic school or whatever, but, we're talking kind of the same lingo. And he said, well, we can help you every penny. I've got people on the ground in Thailand that we can put a convoy together. Just tell me the amount, and we can get food and medicine out to Sakeo and to those people that you saw there. And I said, okay, well, look, it take me a few days to write the check. He says, I know you're good for it. Just tell me. I'll send the word. He alerts his guys, and I think it was $125,000, $150,000 buy food, medicine. We know what to get. We know what they need. Get together. We'll put a convoy together. So the register wants to cover it. Who has a passport? Well, these days, everybody's got a passport. In those days, only Bill Simbro, the religion writer. So, Bill, you got the assignment. He flies out to Thailand. He's there. They've got these white sheets where they write on it, gifts from Iowa, nothing put on the side of the truck, and drives out there. And the next, if we could, the paper, the one on the left, is on Christmas Eve, or on that, they're reflecting the story, our gifts of life on way to refugees. These old trucks with the signs, gifts from Iowa, show up. And on Christmas morning, when you went out on your front porch and picked up your Des Moines Register, unlike I do now, get it online here, but you went out and you opened up the paper. Here was the ultimate Christmas present that Iowans gave to those starving people in Sakeo and even across the border into Cambodia. There was one article about a village there where our food got to, where just the day before people are eating insects. And so, 1979, that started January 16th, the governor came back to the office to Christmas Day. It's a pretty strong case for being the most significant year in Iowa's humanitarian legacy. But it didn't stop there. Money kept coming in. We stopped asking for money in December, right before Christmas. But people continued to raise money and sent it in through 1980. And we had nurses and doctors who we paid their transportation through an organization in Minneapolis called American Refugee Committee. We only gave money to organizations that could account for it. So nothing's going to be stolen. They're all reputable. We gave to some operating programs inside Cambodia. Ended up about $560,000 raised. And Dr. Bill Rosenfeld in Mason City called. I said, hi, I'm Dr. Rosen. I want to go to Thailand to work camp there. I'm ready to leave my practice for a period here. And so we sent him. And he comes back and he writes an article in the University of Iowa Medical School bulletin or alumni. And he said, I was the only doctor for 112,000 people at a place called Khao Dan. where the people in Sakeo had been, were in more shelter, or I'm the only doctor. I saw more emergency medicine in the last 4 days than I will ever see in the rest of my medical career. And he painted the most incredibly compelling picture about the terrible health of these Cambodian genocide victims and what they went through. And some nurses went and just stayed from Iowa. And it was such an experience that united the state in a way that's rarely ever been pulled together. And people were doing things in every community, it seemed. And Governor Ray's leadership in that regard resulted in all this. So to remember Iowa Shares, so I said Scott Racker, Ray Society, OLLI, I endeavored to do things at the World Food Prize, and I started the Iowa Hunger Summit with Governor Vilsack and Governor Branstad around Governor Ray to keep that spirit, because I came back after my foreign service career and being ambassador in Cambodia. I was stunned at how few people talked about what Governor Ray did in his humanitarian terms. And so I started the Iowa Hunger Summit. And then I had the Hoover Wallace dinner, always honor one Republican, one Democrat. Honored Governor Ray, Walter Mondale came down. We had Dr. Rosenfeld come and speak. I commissioned a bust of Governor Ray by Littleton Alston, who has statues in the U.S. Capitol. And I also commissioned a painting, by Rose Franson from Maquoketa. I don't know if some of you may know her. She did Faces of Maquoketa and she did that painting. The governor's sitting there. It's done based on a photo that the governor took of that woman holding her baby at Sakeo on that day. And the other, last one here, Robert Ray Asian Gardens. So the way, how that started, it's a Chinese design pavilion manufactured in outside Beijing. But it was done by a Chinese-American architect named Paul Shao. And he had a grand design for the Chinese Cultural Center of America, which would be on the Des Moines River downtown. Beautiful thing, but nobody would give him any money. And he had, recruited me along Mike Simonson, who, is now on the city council, the vice president, president from Cortev, Pioneer Hybrid there, but couldn't raise any money to build the Chinese Cultural Center. So I said, Paul, you have this beautiful design. If you really want to see it built, I have a way to do that, but it'll require that you change the name to the Robert D. Ray Asian Garden. Well, it was agonizing for him. Not that he had anything against Governor Ray, but he was all about, Chinese legacy, building connections back to China. Here, he had a couple of Chinese ambassadors show up, to sort of help dedicate the ground where it was going to be built. But he couldn't raise. And finally he said, okay, I agree. Changed the name. The money poured in. It was built. And as I hope, a considerable monument to to the governor and his legacy. I sort of just one few last points, if I may. Forgive me for going on too long. I'm in trouble with Tracy and Lisa and that. But Bishop Sharon, who succeeded Bishop Dingman, told me that when Pope John Paul II was close to death, the bishops of the Catholic bishops were invited to come to Rome for one last, very brief audience. They're all lined up one by one, go up, and John Paul is now very old, bent over, has his robes on and his mitre, and one by one they come and they leave. And Joseph Sharon, the Bishop of Des Moines, whose first time meeting the Pope, described to me how when he got there up with the Pope, and he said, Your Holiness, I'm Joseph Sharon, the Bishop of Des Moines. Your Holiness will remember your visit to Iowa in 1979. And he said when the Pope heard Iowa, it was like he had a little jolt of adrenaline. And he visibly moved and sat up. And he said, Iowa. Then he paused. Farms. And he paused. Refugees. So the man who put the word refugees with Iowa on the lips of a dying pope, who made the shape of our state on a highway map a symbol of hope to refugees 10,000 miles away on the other side of the earth. The man who was the one governing official to say, I will take the boat people, refugees, when no one else would. And was the man who said, I'll take the tie down to keep their culture intact. Represents an incredible legacy. And I like to think that we kind of need Governor Ray now. And we need that spirit that he fostered to bring people together. You know, Governor told me how he and Mrs. Ray were shopping in a supermarket, pushing their cart. And the intersection of a couple of aisles, they almost bumped at a collision with a man who was a refugee. And he stopped and he walked around up to them and said, you saved my life. I just want to say thank you. And so I tried to think, well, what might we do to give emphasis to Governor Ray's legacy? What might we do in a way that we could perhaps bring people together, dare I think, across political party lines? And I would like to suggest, Judy, to you and Scott Racker and the Ray Society, let's propose to the governor and the state legislature that they enact a law that makes September 26th every year an official day of recognition for Governor Robert Ray. You know, in all the history of our state, there are only 3 such days. One for Herbert Hoover, one for Norman Borlaug, and one for George Washington Carver, which Simon Estes and I launched in 2020. And I think it's time 250-year history. Next year will be do the math, 1846, 180th, I guess, anniversary of statehood for Iowa. Wouldn't it be appropriate that every year when you're having the Ray lecture, that it would be on the day that's official day of recognition? And every school in Iowa ought to celebrate that, know that. Now, along with that, we should suggest that they appropriate money to have Iowa Public Television make a documentary about 1979 and about Governor Ray and this incredible legacy, so that those who don't remember it as we do, and will always know and will hear that story and will know great figure who moved among us. And, Governor Ray took me to have lunch with Maestro Junta about commissioning a symphony, which I did, the World Food Prize. And it was a symphony in honor of Norman Borlaug called Symphony of the Prairie Farm. There ought to be a symphony, I thought maybe like Iowa Shares a Ray of Hope, we have a contest even. But wouldn't it be, imagine the Civic Center filled with people for the world premiere of the symphony dedicated in honor of Governor Ray's incredible humanitarian heritage. And I think we ought to get a statue of him. I've got a stable of artists. I've got one who's arriving tonight with another statue that's going to be unveiled at the World Food Prize, driving in from Boise. He's got 4 statues in the U.S. Capitol. But in just a minute, and when you make a statue, you can get 2 or 3, and we're going to have one on the Drake campus, right? We're going to have one downtown, and then there should be one someplace nationally. I'm not sure, the president's got this national park of American heroes.
Statuary Hall.
Yeah. Well, Statuary Hall, we have to take out Governor Kirkwood, but sign me up. So the legislature has to do that. But I think that we should undertake and do those things. Honor Governor Ray, and I wanted to be sure I mentioned them here as well, and so that we can always remember 1979, and you all can decide where it fits in the history of our state, but I think, B.A. struck. They're all sitting in the audience in heaven. St. Peter comes and says, I've got the envelope with the winner now of which year is, and there's Borlaug and Governor Ray and George Washington Carver, and they're all there, smiling like at the Oscars, but hoping it's going to be me, or, and there. But just thinking about it and remembering it. Forgive me for going on too long. I apologize and that, but there was a lot to share, a lot of stories to tell, and I appreciate. Hope you recorded it, right? Yeah. Because now I have to do it all again. Thank you. If you have questions, I'm happy to take questions, but I know you've got goodies out front.
We have some goodies up front, and we know you're going to be joining us.
Right, yes, of course.
Yes, and we love it when you go over.
Yeah.
We've seen you do that before.
What have I done? Oh.